Yes, we are ready. So just before we get started, I have some suggested language that I just asked Jennifer to go make copies so we would all have it. So this is the Committee of Conference on House Bill 1069. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate that. There were, as I sort of looked at this, I think there are sort of two issues. One is kind of a narrow fix that I hope will be non-controversial. The other is a little bit broader, that I'm kind of agnostic on, but I can see the arguments on both sides, and maybe we should have a discussion of the little broader one. But first, the two things that were the basic reason for the House requesting a committee of conference were, there is language in the Senate version of the bill that we were concerned could and it's the language I'm referring to, says, and I'm quoting here, no charge shall be made for records delivered electronically. And I think what the Senate intended by that, and actually the House has so much similar language, is that you meant by that no charge shall be made for clicking the send button and having it delivered. And we're completely in agreement with that. As I said, there's sort of similar language in the House version. What we were concerned about is arguably that could be read. Would you mind, Jen? Would you mind just giving it to all the members of the? Great, thank you very much. Arguably, that could be read to mean no charge can be made for records delivered electronically. That includes not only hitting the send button, but any of the prior work of. In other words, if the records are delivered electronically, then there can be no charge, even if the town, were faced with more than 250 emails, more than 250 electronic communications, which was the subject of 1002. So we were concerned that this could be read as conflicting with House Bill 1002. So a proposed change that I have, and I've asked that this be passed around. I've worked off the Senate version of 1069 with your amendment. Where is it? 1966S. So what I would propose to change there is on page 2 of that amendment, in section 4 of the bill, Roman numeral 5-A parenthesis B. So I changed the language in the last sentence to say, no charge shall be made for the delivery of records electronically, comma, but a reasonable charge may be made for the time necessary to process the request if authorized by this chapter. And I had to word it that way because we couldn't say the specific section because the governor hasn't signed 1002 yet, and so it's not really law right now. So that's why I worded it that way. So that would take care of, I think that would take care of that issue. It would make it clear that what we're saying, you can't charge for the electronic delivery being sort of, that what we mean by that is pressing the send button. You can't charge for that. But if it meets the requirements of 1002, that is, it's more than 250 electronic communications or whatever, you could charge for the time necessary to do that.
Mr. Chairman, you're talking about the time to put everything together versus, because you're talking here about the electronic delivery, but
Right.
now you're talking about the work that
That
it's
goes in-
taking. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you have language that speaks to that?
I do. So what I said is
Okay. Well,
the delivery, no charge should be made for the delivery of records electronically, but a reasonable charge may be made for the time necessary to process the request if authorized by this chapter. And so that would, you know, by, if authorized by this chapter really means if 1002 would allow it.
right. I understand that. Okay. The only thing I'm concerned about, and it's anything that has to do with 91A. There are a lot of people that follow 91A. They're very concerned about changes, and I'm just concerned about what is a reasonable charge. And usually it's laid out when you're doing it by paper. There's a cost per page, but what is a reasonable charge here? Because in 1002, they you could do the 250 requests. It doesn't cost you anything, but now you're instituting a reasonable charge. And,
Okay.
and I'm concerned that they're going to be a little in conflict. And when we had the public hearing on on the other bill, 1002, a lot of people were concerned about cost, if there were any cost, and they get those 250 for free. But now you're saying here, if it's electronic, they're going to be charged what is considered to be a reasonable cost.
Well, you know what? So, I mean, maybe does it help if I take out the word reasonable? In other words, the only thing I meant to say by that is the really, I think the key point is the last words, if authorized by this chapter. And in other words, what that means is it's authorized by this chapter only if it meets the requirements of 1002.
Okay.
So if I,
Yeah, I would just bring up, I've been in communication with my town manager. They just recently completed a request, one request that was an unbelievable amount. It cost them $25,000 to produce what this person asked for, and that was just one request. In 1002, that's free. That doesn't cost anything. So I'm concerned that this is going to conflict. It was all electronic. All the information was submitted electronically back to the person. So I'm just concerned that we're doing something here that maybe we need to be a little concerned about.
yeah, well, you know what? So if, in other words, I think if your concern was that by having the word reasonable in there, that could mean, in other words, that somehow a court or whatever could find that a charge was reasonable even if it didn't meet the criteria of 1002. I see what you're saying. And so what if we just took the word reasonable out? So in other words, so it would say, but a charge may be made for the time necessary to process the request if authorized by this chapter. What that really means is if authorized by 1002.
Quite frankly, I wouldn't. My problem is not with reasonable; it's with charge, and I don't know if that's gonna conflict, because I think if you're gonna charge, it should be something reasonable. But what do you consider to be reasonable? And that's where you're going to run into issues, because everyone is going to look, each community could decide what unreasonable is. There's no one particular standard other than they may charge if they so choose to. And I can pretty well guarantee you.
But isn't the key here if authorized by this chapter? So the only authorization in the chapter is 1002.
Right, and that is after 250.
Right.
So it is going beyond the $250, 250 requests. So I don't feel comfortable with this, again, because right to know is very tenuous and people get really upset about it. This is something new. So I think we can continue to have a discussion about it, but,
Sure.
I'm just concerned.
Yeah,
So,
Representative Tur and then Representative Smith.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So just looking at this, one thought is I think the real question for me or problem with this for me is the word time, because time is what was taken out of 1002 from its original form versus what passed eventually was on a per record basis. And that's the part that I think worries me about this kind of changes. My understanding is when we say, request authorized by this chapter, 1002 doesn't really have a time component in it anymore. So I was thinking, since this is really B, and correct me if I'm a different understanding, B, 5AB is basically talking about the process of delivering the thing, not the process of producing the records. And so I was thinking if we just basically sort of clarified that no delivery charge would be made, and then leave the other parts out because 1002 sort of takes care of that. So I don't know what folks think of that, but I worry about putting too much language in here and sort of relying on the passage of 1002 to sort of clean it up on the back end.
yeah.
So, I'm sorry, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm having a funny kind of problem in terms of what hat I should be wearing. I know that I'm here to support the House position as compared with the Senate position, and this is new. This language is new. I hadn't seen it before as an alternative to the House position. But to me, the problem isn't the word reasonable. The problem is the word charge. And one hopes that we would never consider charging anything that wasn't reasonable. We would never do a thing like that. Never, never. And I don't understand how this helps support the House position and at the same time bring us closer to being able to reach accommodation with the Senate. Am I missing something here?
So I guess what I would say is this. So Eric, are you, maybe your language does the trick. In other words, you would say no delivery charge shall be made for records produced electronically. Does that, with putting aside the concerns that Representative Smith had for a moment, would that solve your issue?
Well,
Sen-
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's already there. All we did in the Senate was we just took the language that you sent us and we just reconfigured it a little bit.
Right.
And so it already says no charge shall be made for records delivered electronically. I think that's very clear. Because you're talking about the delivery. It is hitting that send button to somebody who requested the information.
Well, see, but you know what I mean, that's certainly one reasonable interpretation of it. And that's what, as I said before, I think that we sort of assumed that's what you meant. But that's not the only interpretation. You could read no charge shall be made for records delivered electronically. You could read that to mean if the records are sent by hitting the send button, no charge can be made for those records, no matter what the prior circumstances were about getting the information. In other words, even if it is more than 250 emails. Whereas I think, Eric, we restructured the language just a little bit, but I think, can you read
Yeah,
it again?
it was just to clarify the difference between the two interpretations that I think Representative Lynn is Chairman Lynn is talking about. Basically, by adding the word delivery, it takes the ambiguity out, because the way it's written now, it could sound like it could override 1002, which does allow for charges if you exceed the 250 records. So by saying delivery, it sort of makes this paragraph B just about, you know, the difference between postage versus there's no postage if you're hitting the send button. So it's just a one word. It would be just a one word change, and I would hope not bring in those questions about reasonableness and time, you know, and the other stuff that's sort of bogged down for a while. 1002.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I guess,
Yes.
I guess the issue is to put the object is delivery, not records. So by, as I understand it, to move shall be made for, and the object of for is delivery, not records. So it's really just changing records and swapping records and delivery. Is that what, is that?
Well, you know what, I think, in other words, I think that the way Representative Tur phrased it,
Does do that, yeah.
right, no, in other words, no delivery, if you say it, if you refer to it as delivery charge, it's a specific kind of charge, a charge for delivery. So no delivery charge shall be made for records produced electronically.
That would be my thought.
I think that, I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with that, if everybody else is. And Representative Smith, you may, I realize you may not be, but so if you have further comment on that?
I have a further comment on that. Particularly, I have to admit that I'm a product of progressive education, so parts of speech I'm not so, good at. I barely know a subject from a predicate. So I look to the senator as being far superior to me in her educational
no.
ability. But I would like to ask Senator Carson, I'm delighted to sit here with you. We haven't sat together in a long time. About your $25,000 figure, because I'm curious about what caused that $25,000 and wonder, and I've had this discussion over these bills quite a bit, including with the Municipal Association and others, about why, how those charges get so high. And is it that immediately an attorney is called in and hired, not someone on staff, to do what one might think would be routine work? What comprises that 25,000?
From what I've been told, it is an individual who made the request going back to 2017 of all police activity in the town of Londonderry. So as you can imagine, anybody who had any contact with the police, you've got to redact their names. You've got to go through all of that. And I just, you look at the volume of the paperwork that had to have been gone through in order to do that.
Do you know if anybody picked up the phone and said, what do you need this information for?
I don't believe that you can ask them. They make the request and you have to do what they give them, what they've asked for. You don't get to qualify it. You don't need I mean, in fact, I was having a conversation with somebody that maybe in the next step of reforming, and that's what we're trying to do here of Article 91A, is to create the ability for the municipality to reach out and said, hey, what is it exactly that you're looking for? You have some people that this is what I want and I want it all, but they really don't have the ability. We do have the right to know ombudsman. I don't know. It's due to
For a while.
go out in 2025, and I think next year would be a good time to look at it. It'll be a budget year. Whether or not we want to extend that, from what I understand, he does a lot of things for people. They do call them, but there's got to be a point where there can be some sort of negotiation between an individual and a municipality over the volume of what someone is looking for. And, it can be done in a way, well, we want to answer your request. Can you please, narrow it down for us? What exactly are you looking for? But from what I understand, sometimes that happens, but sometimes it doesn't.
Well, just on that point, I mean, there is language now in 1002
Yep.
that says, it's not exactly as strong as
Right.
you suggest, but it says that the town can sort of, if, have some discussion with the requester about, what
Right.
are you looking for in an effort to try to narrow the request, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I do too, because that was only one of the requests. We've had another one that's cost, and it's been a series of requests that have cost the town. And this was last year, I believe in September, October, I was told, $35,000. And so these things add up after a while. And this is taxpayer money. This is not money that, a municipality is hidden away in a room someplace. This is all the taxpayers are paying for it. And I think when you have small requests, they're most certainly, please, give them what they want. But when you get these huge requests, it becomes a burden on the municipality, and it causes, a good amount of taxpayer dollars to be used. So you have to honor that. It is in our Constitution. But I do think that, there should be a way for the municipality and the individual who's the requester to have a conversation about, what are you looking for? Can we help you narrow this down? That helps you, that helps me, or the municipality get through this process sooner. And I think that's something that we can try to do.
I agree. I agree. So let me go back to my request. Would everybody be comfortable if we took the Senate version of this, and on lines 29 and 30, we changed the language to read, no delivery charge shall be made for records produced electronically? Everybody all right with that?
I can't agree to that at this point. I'm increasingly concerned with all the correspondence I'm getting from town managers. Just got one handed to me a few minutes ago from the Hudson Police Chief.
Yep.
Phone calls that I've gotten from local officials. I think that we are opening up a Pandora's box. I know the House has passed a bill, Senate passed a bill. I don't know that we know the ramifications and the costs of this, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to agree to this. I do like the fact that on Representative Lynn, on line 23, that you have changed from person to member of the media or somebody with a New Hampshire address, but I'm not sure that I'm ready to say this is a good idea to move forward.
So I guess, I mean, so I'm just wondering if we, I guess the thing I'm not sure I understand though, Senator, is this: if we left the language the way it is in the Senate amendment, right? What do you think that means then in terms of electronic, of what happens when records are delivered electronically? That's the thing I'm not clear if I understand.
Could I ask a question of the president?
Sure.
Are you saying that you could not support, if it came to pass that the House decided to accept the Senate version as you approved it, that you are not prepared to accept that?
I'm saying that I am increasingly concerned with all the correspondence I've had since we passed this version 2 weeks ago, that I am increasingly concerned with opening up a Pandora's box for local officials without knowing the ramifications or the cost because of, you know, some of the correspondence I've received, and I think it was the town of Tilton talked to me, a former state senator who's the town manager now, a request that it was 400 hours, and then the person didn't even pick up the information. So I don't know. This is
So Senator Bradley,
increasingly a concern.
okay, so Senator Bradley, what you're saying is despite my naive,
No one's
understanding.
naive here.
oh, yes, my naive understanding that the House has a position that the House conferees are presenting and the Senate has a position that the Senate conferees, that you are not supporting the Senate.
Because of some of the correspondence that I've received since the Senate voted on this a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you, that's very
I'm not
informative.
saying absolutely no, never, but I think that some of the concerns that local officials have raised have not been addressed in either version.
So you know what, can Senator, I'll get you just in just one second, but Senator Bradley, the thing that I'm having some difficulty with is this. If, as Representative Smith pointed out, suggested, if the House were to simply concur with the Senate amendment, and if my interpretation of the current language on lines 29 and 30 is correct, then at least one arguable interpretation of that version would be no charge should be made for records delivered electronically. If that can be interpreted, and I think it could be, to say if the records are delivered electronically, there can be no charge, even if it's more than 250 electronic communications or whatever. I guess the thing to the extent that your concern is imposing an undue burden on towns, it would seem to me that this could be read, the Senate version right now could be read to mean it's more of a burden on towns because
Okay.
they can't charge at all.
I suspect you are correct in that.
So that,
There's the conundrum.
that's, that's, the Senate has, with deference to your having a different view, I understand, but the Senate has passed this. So,
If I may, that language is language that we agreed from the House. The only difference here is the change of the word from citizen to person. That's the
Right.
only change. This is all the language that we got from the House. We just restructured it, but it's all there. The only difference, and I can see where there would be angst with changing it from citizen to person. Because when you talk about citizen, you're talking about citizen of the state of New Hampshire. Person, it leaves it wide open for anybody. And that's the emails that I have been getting, that people are concerned that this is way too open. Anybody from any place in the world can request these records. And there's a reason why, well, I'll tell you why we did that. There's two reasons. One is in regards to a case currently that's going on in Rochester, where the newspaper editor lives in Maine,
Painfully
and
familiar with the
he's
case.
trying to get the request. He writes, his newspaper is in Rochester. They will not honor his 91A request because he is not a citizen of the state of New Hampshire. He lives in Maine. That's one reason. The other reason is we have people that live here in our state that are here legally. They're immigrants here legally that pay taxes to the state of New Hampshire. They pay municipal taxes, but they're not citizens. So they can't make a 91A request. If you're going to define citizens of the state, they're not citizens yet. They're here legally, they're doing everything right, they're doing the right thing. But by using the word citizen, it doesn't apply,
oh,
even though they're taxpayers.
yes, Senator, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I do understand it is an interesting position to be in when we do wear different hats, and I am here to represent the position of the Senate. And I am very supportive of the right to know and want to make sure that people have access to it. I do like the steps that have been suggested to put some, I don't want to use the word guardrails, but nothing else is coming to mind, but to put some conditions that are appropriate on it so that we don't run into the issues that Senator Bradley described. That, I mean, it is unduly burdensome to some towns. And I believe that language, is that language undue burden? Is that in?
That is
That is
in the, yes, that is in the,
So
yes.
But, Mr. Chairman, can you reference, if House Bill 1002 becomes law? Make it conditional upon the passage of that particular legislation? And that could be a way to tie them together.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we, can we do that? Can we, Jennifer, can we make it referent? Can we say, you know, no delivery charge shall be made, for records, but other charges may be allowed per, if,
For the statute.
in a,
It would likely, I don't want to speak for OLS, but I think it would likely be a conditional effectiveness for the section. Like if this bill were to pass,
Then,
if HB 1002 becomes law, then this section would be enacted. I think
okay.
without certainty that they could structure something like that.
I believe that's not uncommon, Mr. Chair, where we do refer to other legislation as a condition. We do it, I think, with some frequency. I have a more basic question. Why did the Senate agree to a committee of conference if there might be a belief in the Senate that they don't want this to go ahead? Is that a process question that you don't want to address now? I can understand that.
We're polite.
Mr. President, I've known you for a long time, and I know you are polite, and you are careful, and you are precise, but you also don't like to waste time. That's all I'll say.
So, you know what, can I, yes.
If I may, I might be able to answer that for you. The morning that this came, that we had to make decisions about this, I had a meeting with members from the Municipal Association who wanted us to do a lot more than what this bill really addressed. I'm not going to say I said no, because with the right to know, you cannot slip anything or try to put something through without having a public hearing. You just cannot do that. And I just said no. And then probably within an hour, I started getting emails from municipalities saying to kill this. So I don't agree with that kind of things that happen. I feel that there is a value to any bill, and it's the people that are sitting at this table who makes the decisions.
I
So-
thank you for your candor, Senator. I pretty much had figured that out all by my own self as to how we got here, and I'm very glad that you shared that with us, and it does show the difficulty that we have as to how we make these decisions, and to my knowledge, actually, we weren't elected by the Municipal Association. That's all I want to say.
So, you know what, I guess, you know, one of the things, this sort of melds over into the citizen person issue. I think it's important to understand that the even the current law which uses the word citizen, it doesn't define citizen. And as far as I know, there's no case law that says citizen means a citizen of the town, or citizen means a citizen of the state, or citizen means a citizen of the United States. So it's, or the world, I suppose. So, it's to the extent that we are hearing from various, and I've gotten some of those too, from municipalities that, the sky is falling if we change citizen to person. Apparently, it was it certainly would be an argument that citizen means citizen of the United States under current law. Yet we haven't had like a flood of, California. Somebody, as my former colleague Judge Smuckler used to say, somebody jammy surfing at midnight in California, deciding to make a request to somewhere in New Hampshire. So I'm not sure how much of a concern that really is, but I guess I guess I don't really know if we're gonna, unless the theory is to just sort of tank this whole bill, and I assume that you're here, so nobody's particularly interested in doing that. I think we're still really back to this issue of what do we want to say about delivery charges for electronic records? That's,
Mr. Chairman, if I can suggest that we take like a 5-minute recess where the Senate can discuss these proposed changes. Because I think at this point, we're just going around.
sure. Okay,
We're
no,
just
no,
going
that-
around and
yeah,
around.
no, that's
and I don't want to
fine.
waste anyone's time.
That's
So,
fine. Sure.
okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Let's do
Can
that.
we meet? Is there a place where we
Oh,
can?
yeah, you can.
right through here.
Oh, you're right in there. Yeah,
Okay.
right in there.
Okay.
And I'll make sure I turn off the
Oh.
surreptitious recording device.
Mr. Chairman, I heard you have all kind of snacks back there.
Not too many.
Just coffee. Okay. All right.
All right, so,
What do you have to tell us? You want to start?
So,
Turn your mic on.
thank you. I think we're better off agreeing to disagree, and with apologies that we did not have adequate time to have a public hearing on some of the requests to mitigate some of the issues in the bill with the changes that were asked for by the Municipal Association. Senator Carson had over 60 bills that came over from the House with less time. As you know, Senate had more time on Senate bills, House had more time. It just didn't happen. And I think as Senator Carson has explained, changes to 91A need to be more than carefully considered. And as I said before, the implications for towns is significant, and the number of towns that have contacted, I suspect you folks and us too, since the Senate passed the bill, I could not have supported it at the time, knowing the implications of it. So I think all of us are better off waiting until, well, I won't be here, but others will be, till next year to move forward with it, knowing that House Bill 1002, which the prime sponsor of this bill is a co-sponsor of, is on its way to the governor, because you passed it, we passed it, and it's on its way.
so I'm sorry, is that, are you basically saying that the Senate's position is going to be simply to non-concur?
I think that would be the best outcome, yes.
Okay, all right. No, that's, all right. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Very good. All right.
It's always a pleasure to see you, Representative Smith. Yeah, and just, bring this forward again next year
All right.
when 1002 is law.
Right. Well, it'll be, I wonder, it'll be, I wonder if there's a, if the situation in Rochester will end up leading to a Supreme Court decision
Well,
on
very
this
well
issue,
could.
that, which may end up, may, at least the major issue of what is a citizen will be decided. And I cannot imagine that they would say citizen means just a citizen of the town. And so that Rochester newspaper can't get the records because the owner lives in Maine. I mean, that would be mind boggling if they were to say that, I think, anyway. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's
Thank
always a
you.
pleasure to see you and
Same here.
my fellow judiciary members.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you.